Herzlich willkommen zum zweiten.
Welcome to the second day at IAA Mobility 2021, and we're coming to you live from Munich. It's great you've tuned in again, and what we're going to see now in the next 30 minutes or so is some great excitement at Volkswagen Live. We're going to talk about affordable electric mobility and social business models, and also, spoiler alert here, together with our head of sales, Klaus Zellmer, we'll be casting a glimpse into the future of the ID family. And since we're talking about that, the ID family, there was something about that, because Tanya Higgins-Nauking is going to tell you how you can ask your questions.
Hello, Volkswagen fans from around the world. We'd love to hear from you. You can ask us anything. How? Well, grab your smartphone, look up Volkswagen on Instagram, click through the Volkswagen stories and send us your question. We'll answer your question live here in the studio. And at the end of the show, you'll find the answers to all your ID family questions. And to give you a little inspiration, we have summarized the milestones on Volkswagen's Way to Zero for you.
Fighting climate change is the challenge of the century. That's why Volkswagen is on the way to zero. The goal? Balance sheet climate neutrality by 2050. Only electromobility will allow us to significantly lower CO2 emissions over the next 10 years. The way to zero is most visible on the road and in the new Volkswagen models, and at new events like the Way to Zero convention, where Volkswagen presents its goals. By 2030, Volkswagen wants to increase the share of fully electric vehicles in Europe to at least 70% of its revenue. In North America and China, that number climbs to more than 50%. With the Accelerate strategy, Volkswagen speeds the transformation and adds at least one new electric car each year. We're pushing things forward and are shifting into mass production, covering all segments. At the Power Day in March, the battery was the main focus. It's the key component of electromobility. That's why an uninterrupted cycle in terms of raw material reuse is essential. In future, more than 95% of raw materials contained in electric car batteries will be reused. In Salzgitter, Volkswagen Group Components is operating an initial recycling plant. However, to make e-mobility actually CO2 neutral, the subject of decarbonization needs to be addressed holistically. By 2025 alone, Volkswagen will invest about 14 billion euros in its decarbonization effort. CO2 neutral mobility needs power generated from renewable resources. In Mecklenburg, Volkswagen supports the creation of Germany's largest independent solar power project. Not only in Germany, but across Europe, there is a plan to create new wind and solar energy parks by 2025. Volkswagen's goal? 7 terawatt-hours of green electricity by 2025. The Way to Zero also includes the decarbonization of the supply chain and manufacturing, which produce almost half of all CO2 emissions of an electric car. The European car production plants of all Volkswagen brands already get their external power from renewable energies. For this, Volkswagen also expects its suppliers to do their part by making CO2 emissions a central criterion in awarding supply contracts. With the Way to Zero, Volkswagen commits to the goals laid out by the Paris Climate Agreement. By 2030, the plan is to lower emissions across the entire life cycle by an average of 17 tons of CO2 per car. With this, Volkswagen is on its way to becoming the most sought-after brand for sustainable mobility.
Die Zukunft von Volkswagen
The
ist
future of Volkswagen is electric, so that is a fact. Between 2033 and 2035, in Europe, the last internal combustion engine car in Europe will be rolling off the line. I mean, this offers great opportunities, but also has a number of risks. And this is what we would like to talk today about with the VDK Social Care Association, Verena Bentele, about, and Volkswagen's marketing head, Klaus Zellmer. Now, Verena, VDK, the Social Care Association, is part of the Alliance Socially Acceptable Mobility Transition. And what you are doing is you want to make sure that mobility and e-mobility should be affordable, and you're afraid it might not be for everyone. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's exciting to talk about that. Why? Because our members predominantly live in rural areas, but also in the bigger cities, but really many people living out there in rural communities. And for elderly people, people with disabilities, mobility is extremely important if they want to get to their doctor, to make their groceries, etc., or maybe generally traveling to another city and meet friends and family. So, our issue really that we are focusing on is that for our members, we wonder, can everyone really afford to purchase an electric car? Because in the past, everyone's been saying the old diesel car cannot be driven in the inner cities anymore, in the larger towns and cities. Now our members are saying, well, is that going to mean that we don't have mobility in the future anymore? Another, people obviously are also suffering from climate change, although they're not causing, they're not the source of climate degradation. So people who do not contribute to carbon emissions should also have forms of mobility that are affordable for them. Now, Klaus, Volkswagen is about mobility for the masses. The ID Life has been presented here, the trade show, which is really an entry-level model for e-mobility. Do you share those concerns as voiced by Verena? Well, I'd underscore it, because mobility is a fundamental need. In all the scenarios that Verena has described, Volkswagen has always been about democratization of mobility. It started with the Beetle, people enjoying the freedom of traveling on their own, then later with the VW camper van, and we go through all these individual steps here. Back in the Volkswagen history, but also going forward today, we have new technologies, electric mobility, but also in-vehicle systems. We are using in the ID.4 technologies that you normally would get only in the premium segment, a head-up display with augmented reality that makes driving instructions really visible in front of you on the windscreen, helps you to navigate a city safely. And as you said, rightly so, Sina, we're at the ID Life booth here at Munich, which is a battery electric vehicle, starting with an entry-level price of 20,000 euros. We're going to talk about a little more in a moment, but before we do that, I'd like to take you on a little journey. The Mediterranean island of Astypalea is going to be a model island for climate-neutral mobility. And why that is important, well, this is what Head of Development Thomas Ulbrich has to say.
Kollegen und ich Ihnen immer wieder gesagt, dass wir als Marke Volkswagen die E-Mobilität aus der Nische ins Volumen bringen werden. Heute, 2021, bin ich mir sicher, dass niemand mehr daran zweifelt, dass Volkswagen liefert.
Volkswagen is delivering, while at the same time showing how it can work. E-mobility for everyone. Astypalea, a small island in the Aegean. Together with the Greek government, Volkswagen is turning the island into a model region for climate-friendly mobility. Within just a few years, the plan is to make all traffic on Astypalea completely electric. For this purpose, charging points are being installed and power generation converted to solar and wind. In addition, there are new mobility services, such as car sharing and ride sharing, all of it fully electric. On Astypalea, Volkswagen wants to prove that you can have two things at once: CO2 neutral living and individual mobility.
I believe such an agreement between Astypalea and Volkswagen is a baby step towards large-scale electrification, but nevertheless a very important one. Small islands have a different operating model in the sense that it's closed-looped, predictable routes, so charging infrastructure can be deployed at specific points. It might be very different in a slightly larger island, such as UK or even a different country. But it's a good learning experience to understand user behaviors. And if you're on holiday in Astypalea, it's great because you see how zero-emission vehicles work and you spread the word.
Surveys show that many people still think that electric cars are too expensive, despite government subsidies in countries like Germany. In a study, 30% of people with low incomes said that their next car will have a conventional engine instead of an electric one.
I think making e-mobility for the masses is possible only when we start seeing OEMs produce cars across segments. So be it a small car, a family-sized SUV, or a mid-sized vehicle. And that happens only when you're able to bring the end-to-end cost of the entire supply chain down, going all the way back to the raw materials that go into the car. The battery cost can be anywhere between 30 to 50% of the vehicle. And we need OEMs like Volkswagen to constantly innovate on range to cost ratios and cell to chassis technology to bring these costs down.
In Italy, for example, which so far has not been a trendsetter in terms of e-mobility, Volkswagen will build 3,000 charging points over the next 3 years in cooperation with Enel, the Italian power company. Europe-wide, Volkswagen wants to create as many as 18,000 charging points together with partners. Volkswagen is also investing in the expansion of charging infrastructure in China and the US. At the same time, new cars for different target groups are being developed all the time. The youngest member of the ID family is the ID Life, the new entry-level model to e-mobility, shown as a concept at the IAA. So that one day electromobility for all will not be limited to a small Greek island, but be available everywhere.
Verena, wir haben es eben gerade im Beitrag
Verena, we just heard in that video that in a survey, 30% of all people with lower incomes have said they would buy an internal combustion engine car. Now, your alliance also says all people should have access to climate-friendly mobility. How's that going to work? Well, there have to be different options and ways to achieve that. What's important for me is to realize our demand that e-mobility also must be affordable for everyone. Now, you might ask the question whether our existing mobility is going to continue the way it exists now if you want to be climate-friendly. So you have to be honest. Now, I don't see anything, meaning I don't have a car and I don't own a car and I'm not going to buy one from Volkswagen. But what I'm saying here is mobility has to be available for people one way or the other, people who live in rural areas, people precisely with lower incomes, and there could be models like car sharing where mobility could also be made available by bus sharing, that could also work in rural communities where people with a timetable every 1 hour, say, can travel from A to B. Now, as a pedestrian myself, I think the concept of car-free inner cities a very appealing concept, and instead a focus on public transport. Or if you take collecting taxi services where people can actually call a taxi that picks them up. Now, I understand where people are saying they would buy an internal combustion engine car, well, because these are less costly, and this is a fundamental understanding of e-mobility. People see a lack of charging infrastructure, especially for elderly people, people with disabilities. That is still a pressing issue. But Verena, do you think car subscriptions could help in that? So if you don't buy a car, but just subscribe to one? I agree. Purchase cost for many people are a barrier to entry in that segment. But I know that people who are in the poorer social classes often live in inner cities by transport corridors that are noisy, don't have access to cars, etc. So I think we have to fundamentally rethink the concept of mobility. We don't want to have a situation where people who don't have the financial means are suffering even further, also are burdened by climate change. Now, in order to rethink that whole concept, I think Volkswagen also wants to play an active part. Just now, we briefly touched on subscription models. Since September, this has existed now for Volkswagen, the ID3 and the ID4. So what do you think? Are subscription models going to help to boost e-mobility and mainstream it? I think there are two things coming together here. Verena has rightly said we have to lower the entry threshold for people to adopt e-mobility. Plus, there's also a general trend in society where fewer and fewer people are interested in buying a car, especially younger people. Volkswagen, in the foreseeable future, wants to offer mobility by hour, by the day, by the week or month, or with a leasing contract, or offering a purchase contract. So offer flexible forms of mobility, and it's precisely that flexibility that's key to success. We started with our subscription model. For a 3-month period, including all costs, you can get your vehicle, your electric vehicle, here in Germany. Now, today, this has already exists in rental car agreements, obviously, but not for a longer period of time, like 3 months that we're offering. And we assume that many people would go for that model rather than buying a car and investing, and instead are paying for a fixed price and are getting getting an interest for e-mobility as well. And they may use it as a test drive scenario, test it for 3 months, and then you buy one eventually. Well, thank you very much. We had a chance to touch on those interesting questions. We're going to meet Klaus again. He's going to be talking to Tanya about the future of the ID family, and Tanya is going to summarize this right now.
So the German alliance called Socially Acceptable Mobility Transition envisages that in the future, many more people will be able to travel without owning a car themselves. Alternatives should help to make e-mobility affordable. The key word here is shared mobility. The Greek island of Astypalia has become a model for the green transition. New mobility services, such as car sharing or ride sharing, will reduce and improve congestion in traffic. With the ID Life, Volkswagen has created a vehicle that stands for affordable individual transport. The ID family is getting bigger.
It's only been 5 years since Volkswagen announced a revolution in Paris, when it presented the ID as a concept.
Starting in 2020, we will be launching a new family of electric cars. All of them are based on a new vehicle platform designed exclusively for all electric cars.
Volkswagen kept its promise. Since 2020, ID stands for electromobility for all. The ID3 and ID4 are milestones on the way to zero, the path to CO2 neutral mobility. And the ID family is growing. New models are electrifying additional segments, from the dynamic SUV coupe, the ID.5 GTX, with 220 kilowatts of power, to the electric microbus successor, the ID Buzz. Both will celebrate their premiere in the near future. The latest member is the ID Life, which provides a preview of the first compact car in the ID family. But customer requirements are changing. They want vehicles to be like large mobile devices. Software like that on a smartphone. All vehicles of the ID family can be updated over the air, wirelessly and without visiting the dealership. We call it the software-enabled car. That's where things are moving, a tablet on wheels, live, and we look forward to it. Over-the-air updates, or OTA for short, bring new features to the cars, simply and automatically. They improve existing systems and add new functions. In the ID Lite, the efficiency assist will activate to give the driver additional pointers on how he can use his car more efficiently. That's one thing. Secondly, we will also update the camera, since there's room for improvement regarding the dynamic high beam system. This will give our customers more safety and comfort when driving with the high beams on. The developers at the Volkswagen Group continue developing new functions and rolling them out. New car updates are launched approximately every 12 weeks. More seamless, digital and emotional, the task of the ID Digital. Always new and better, becoming the mobility partner for our customers. Volkswagen announced a change from purely being a car maker to becoming a provider of mobility services. This includes OTA, but also new services that customers will enjoy in their everyday life. In the future, extras can be booked temporarily or permanently. For example, the navigation system or fully autonomous driving functions. The business model 2.0 foresees many ways of adding value. Volkswagen supplies the car and the power, while also providing usage packages and understanding mobility as a service. Imagine every Volkswagen is ready to share, and every Volkswagen drives autonomously. And only a small fraction of the Volkswagen cars on the road are part of the mobility offer. Then we break out of this mobility bubble and create new mobility offers and formats for autonomous driving for everyone, in cities and the rural areas. So the ID family not only grows in the segments, but most of all in its opportunities.
The new Accelerate strategy will help Volkswagen ramp up e-mobility in 2021 and achieve important milestones in digital sales. Klaus, great to have you with me here in the studio to talk about sales. First up, how are you enjoying the IAA mobility this year?
Well, I think it's a good start. It's very different from what we're used to from the past. We had a great press conference yesterday on our ID Live. I think we're on top of the charts out there of people consuming our digital content. So I think we're good.
Okay, let's get started with the new business model 2.0. So over the last few months, customers can start their purchase of the ID3 and ID4 online and then continue with the dealership. But now Volkswagen wants to go one step further. So can you tell us a little bit about this new customer digital journey?
There's a trend that actually supports exactly what we've been doing for the past many months, which is COVID. COVID drove the share of digital interactions with us up by 80%. And so we're just in time there for this year to actually help people sign their contract, be it a lease contract or actually buying a car online. So we're going to be able to do that as the first car manufacturer this year in Germany.
And by the end of this year, you also plan to start a new digital marketplace for stock vehicles and used vehicles. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, more digital interaction, of course, means more potential to sell people your products or your services. So we are going to dispose and present our dealer stock cars, so used cars or new car inventory for people to take an interest and then potentially buy into those cars.
Okay, we've already talked about subscription models, and a very important aspect of that for digital add-ons are over-the-air updates. Volkswagen is the first volume manufacturer to offer this. How does the customer benefit from this?
Well, first of all, I think over-the-air updates, that's a paradigm change. That's a huge change for the industry and for us. It enables us to update cars and to upgrade cars. Update just means that your car ages slowly or slower than our previous technology, and we can enhance driving pleasure, safety, navigation systems. In future, maybe even we can extend the range of an electric car or its performance. So there are huge opportunities for us, for our customers, and of course for our dealers.
Okay, still looking into the future. Next up is the ID5. What can we look forward to?
Well, the ID5 is the first SUV coupe that will be in the market as an electric car. We're really looking forward to that. It shows how versatile and how powerful our MEB platform is. I think the car is sleek, it's beautiful. Of course, it will have the possibility for over-the-air updates. It's a four-wheel drive. It's got two engines in there, and the range that we calculated so far is 497 kilometers. So it's an everyday usable car that adds a lot of fun to your life and a lot of style, of course, because I think it's beautiful.
Can't wait to look at it. Thanks so much for joining us today, Klaus, and all the best for the IAA Mobility. Sina, over to you for a brief summary.
Volkswagen beschleunigt beim Thema
Volkswagen is accelerating its digital transformation also in sales. The first milestones include the complete online purchase option of the ID3 and the ID4, and also there's a test run of subscription models in 2021. Now, an important condition for the success of those additional digital functions is that Volkswagen now, as the only volume manufacturer, makes over-the-air updates available every 12 weeks for the ID3 and the ID4. And this takes us to our long-awaited Ask Me Anything section. And really, you have sent in millions of questions, so thank you very much. And unfortunately, we don't have the time, obviously, to take all of them now, but the most frequently asked ones, obviously, we're going to cover right now, and the other ones will be answered on Instagram. But when I'm saying we, I'm having a visitor here, Silke Bakschik. Where are you right now? Well, I'm working from home, as I typically would these days. And obviously, I wanted to come join you, but there's so much work right now, and I have an excellent team who are there and doing that work. So, yeah, we continue to press forward. Okay, so why don't we start and work through the individual questions here that we've got? There was one, the first one about, what about a really small ID? I mean, that was what really many people wanted to know. It's a good question, and rightly so, it's true for Volkswagen. Volkswagen, of course, that we take pride in that. The ID Live, we've already shown here, our show car, and we left some room below the ID3, so we knew that we're going to roll out smaller cars there as well. And I've seen the concept car recently. The design is very much advanced. We're very happy about it. It's going to be a genuine ID. I think I can say that with the typical ID DNA. And we're going to offer more. The family is growing downwards also below that, not only one model. Well, any more details? Can you spill the beans here? Well, a few more years to go, obviously, but what we focus on are the typical ID DNA features that I think all of you know. Sustainability, first and foremost, has to be fun to drive, long driving ranges, quick charging, connectivity is important. So the entire electronics platform and the electric platform is the same as we use in the ID models, with updatability over the air. And for that small car, what I'm really looking forward to is that we'll convince more people who live in the inner cities to switch, because by the time we will have comprehensive charging infrastructure, also fast chargers in the cities, and I'm sure also young people will take to e-mobility. And this is what the ID Live wants to prepare now. Also bring the girls in, very important. And city dwellers will be driving electrically, I'm sure. So I make sure this car is going to be really practical. It has to be versatile if you really want to have that all-rounder. So I think that is really important to bear in mind. But these ID cars are all amazingly spacious, and they're really going to be helping you. Well, amazingly spacious is an interesting point here. Let's move forward and talk about larger vehicles. When are we going to get an ID Estate the size of a Passat? Well, that's an important question. That will probably launch a little earlier, because in the company car segments, there's a lot of incentives out there in many European countries, and I think it would be great if electric mobility is not about frugality. Quite on the contrary, it's something that is luxury and that's really nice. And we're going to launch such a vehicle as well. It's going to be similar to the ID Vision, if you remember that concept car. So we had the Vision and the Vision Estate, or the shooting brake we called it at the time. Internally, the code name is Aero, which stands for Aerodynamic Roominess. So that vehicle will be slightly flatter. Contrary to the existing ID, slightly longer than the Passat, much more interior space, very elegant, very premium quality, and we're going to go to 700 kilometers of driving range. More performance on top of that, so it's going to be a really neat and sleek company car that many can be looking forward to. Performance is important. This is also something that our community wants to know. We've got one question here, namely, are we going to get a GTX version of the ID3? Well, I bet you this is a question that people would ask, of course, because there are some crazy boys out there who've done a good job, because they already built our IDX, which gives us great fun. So the discussion doesn't stop there. You know, our customers are asking these questions and are demanding it online, and we have quite a large ID community and GTX community fans as well. So what can I say? We're going to work on that project full steam, and I'm not going to let up until we get that car. Well, that's very emotional, isn't it? Because we have another question on an appealing figure. How far have you come developing the ID Buzz? Well, we've come a long way. They're already out there on the streets in autonomous driving test ranges as well. So we are continuing with that rate of new products. The new SUV Coupe will launch just before the end of the year and can then be ordered, and deliveries will start at the beginning of next year. And then after that, right away, we're going to get the ID Buzz. So in the second half of next year, you'll be able to see it as happy families driving the ID Buzz on German roads. It's really fun, and also on European roads as well. So we're going to launch across Europe. And I know our American customers are waiting. California is waiting. So we are hurrying up. They need a slightly larger car, so that takes some more time. Now, here's a final question now for you. You just earlier talked about our first movers, because they come from that community. What do you plan to do with the First Mover Club? First Mover Club will be continued. In other words, we stay in touch with those people. Now, we decided to open the club and to rename it. It's going to be the ID Drivers Club going forward. Because that's only fair. There's so many ID drivers out there who contacted us and said, you know, can we be in the First Mover Club? And I said, well, you can't be a first mover. You should have bought it earlier, right? And then you would have been. So we had a 1-year exclusivity period for our first movers, and now we're really happy that those first movers are also adopting and welcoming all the other users in the club as well. They want to stay in touch and talk to others. It's great. They're generating great, excellent ideas. It's very inspiring for us as well. And we're always happy when our customers are happy with our cars. So this gives us some positive boost, and we like that a lot. So a warm welcome to all new members, and many thanks to all the first movers for cooperating. And, you know, happy birthday, 1 year, and now you'll be migrated into the ID Drivers Club. All right, maybe we're singing a happy birthday song in just a moment. So, great, thank you very much, Silke. I think so far we have taken some good questions and gotten some good answers, and I think all the remaining answers you'll find on Instagram.
Dear viewers, we've almost come to the end of our 3-part live sneak peek around the Volkswagen booth here at the IAA or EMobility Mobility. We still have a few minutes left, so let's take a quick look at what we've experienced here at Volkswagen so far.
Und damit sind wir am Ende der Sendung. Die IAA Mobility geht allerdings gerade erst los und das Tolle ist, Sie brauchen sich überhaupt gar nicht umgewöhnen, denn Tanja wird mit dabei sein, wenn zum Beispiel Oliver Bierhoff über seinen ersten Volkswagen spricht.
Or when YouTube gamer Dennis Hartwig finds out how fast an ID accelerates from 0 to 100. You can experience all of this and much more in our Experience Moments.
Und auch jetzt gibt es gar keinen Grund auszuschalten.
Well, there's no reason at all to leave, because we'll be continuing right away on a talk on the carbon neutral supply chain, including also our Chief Procurement Officer, Murat Axel, and the spokesperson of the Sustainability Council, Georg Kell.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm afraid it's time to say Auf Wiedersehen. We hope, though, that you could get a good impression of the atmosphere and topics here at Volkswagen.
Und danke ans Team, an alle.
And many thanks to our team, everyone who's been working behind the camera in the control room, and many thanks to you, Tanya. That was great fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you again, all of you. And if you want to see us again from home, no problem at all. All of our shows are available online to watch and to download. So, see you soon and take care.